Good morning, Bill Hosko here again, independent nonpartisan candidate for mayor of St. Paul. Today will be my 85th day of door knocking. I began on February 25th, about 3 months ago now. Today is going to be a beautiful day, breezy, but on the cool side, high of 60, 65. Yesterday, I think we hit the mid 80s or so, but humidity's low. I've got my long underwear shirt on, so I'm ready to go. Today, I've been meaning to do this for quite some time. A woman named Mary emailed me in late March, actually, and gave me a series of questions that she would like answered. And I apologize for not getting to them sooner. But she wrote quite a few questions, and I did want to give them proper responses for you here today. As you can see by the cover that she sent me, "Hi Bill, you recently knocked on our door and spoke to my super hot husband. Parentheses, I'm sure you remember him, a dark-haired, blue-eyed Adonis, end parentheses. He accepted your flyer. I have a few questions. Best wishes, Mary Beth H." Okay. You know, folks, I remember talking to Mary Beth and her husband. They were in Mac Grove and hanging a screen door on the front of their house. Mary Beth was on the porch, her husband was outside on the steps, and they're putting the screen door in place. I introduced myself, asked if they would like to have a flyer, and they said yes, they took one. We talked very, very briefly, if I recall. And then it was at the next house that the husband then asked me some questions, and I replied from one house over. The comments about her husband being super hot, and I'm sure you remember him, a dark-haired, blue-eyed Adonis. Very unfortunate introduction to her email, but that goes with the territory. I think I've got these all in order. I wanted you to be able to read these questions as I answer them. When you indicate that calls, letters, and emails will never be ignored, will personal responses be returned or formed, quote, "Thank you so much. Our office will take this into consideration," responses. Will you be responding personally, or will you have staff for this task? My reply, as time allows, I will, or certainly my staff will. Responses will be concise and fully honest, always. Her second question, when you state that you will increase patrols in, quote, high crime areas, Mary is responding to my first flyer. The one here in front of the camera has been slightly updated, a warm weather photo on the front, just a few minor changes. But she's responding to that first flyer, which all of these things in her questions here are on the current flyer. When you state that you will increase patrols in, quote, high crime areas, end quote, how much and what kind of dialogue have you had with the residents of these areas? What have they identified as their needs? How do you plan to support infrastructure and social resources beyond increased police presence? My reply, I've had daily dialogue with residents now across the city for, today will be my 85th day, and I've been in a number of areas, the West Side, West 7th, Highland, Mac Grove, St. Anthony Park, Frogtown, Midway, Dayton's Bluff, Far East Side. I've been all over the city at this point, and I'm feeling really good physically. And what I've heard from people again and again is the public wants to see, number one, they want to see increased patrols in higher crime areas. That's a fact. And number two, they want to see crime reduced. That is a fact. And number three, they want laws enforced. That is a fact. In our first 90 days initiative, I call it in our first 90 days initiative, the public will help me determine specific steps that will be taken. Third question, let's see if I'm doing this correctly now. Let's just check on here. Yep, we're good. Okay. What is your anticipated release date for your revamped city website? Will you be building the website yourself? If not, what will the contract bidding look like for this project? What do you anticipate the cost of such a build out to run? How will you fund it? My reply, in our first 90 days after I and you, ladies and gentlemen, are sworn into office, the public will help me determine specific steps that will be taken. We will work with existing website managers, city staff, and law enforcement, as well as with county and state employees to create the best municipal website in America. Question number 4, once you've created your city-wide crime map, how and how often will it be updated? My reply, it will be updated daily, Monday through Friday, if not 7 days a week. There's 10 primary questions, but within each of those, Mary has a number of smaller questions, so I'm going to continue labeling them 1 through 10, but then there will be sub-questions under each of those numbers. Is this something that's going to be automatically maintained via software for Ramsey County Dispatch, updating the website as 911 calls come in, dedicated staff who transfer police reports into the map, require police to update the map, have software that transfers data from police logs into the map? These details will be, my answer is, these details will be a priority with me, and they will be settled as soon as they possibly can, in all likelihood in our first 90 days. Then she goes on, how do you anticipate funding this? The public, city staff, and myself will also help determine this in our first 90 days. Once you've installed the okay, we're going to go to number 5. Are we good? Yep, we look good. Once you've installed the downtown Skyway audio video, in parentheses AV, security system, how do you plan to manage cybersecurity to ensure that it is only monitored by police? Folks, in the ramp here, my business is located in the corner of a city-owned 7-story, or is it 8? 7-story or 8? I should know this. Block-long parking ramp, and the prototype here for what we could or should do Skyway wide is within this parking ramp here. The public cannot view or listen in on security communications with ramp patrons. There's a number of cameras with audio, so security, the office managers, can talk directly to users of the ramp, or in some cases trespassers, and the trespassers, or more often than not users, can communicate back with the city ramp, the city ramp staff here and managers. So there's a prototype arguably in place here. I understand there's a new system that's been implemented in areas of downtown. It's not system-wide, and it doesn't allow an interaction, as I just described, that we have in this current ramp. Mary goes on, also, why do you capitalize police in your flyer? I do so when I'm referring to the city departments in caps. Always, I've always done that. Public Works, Parks and Rec, the police, no difference. She goes on, once you've got your AV equipment installed and your crime map up and running, how do you plan to discourage/manage vigilantes? I will venture to guess that those in the Skyway system pressing the assistance call buttons will be doing so only if needed. However, if others might do so for pranks, cameras will be simultaneously monitoring the location. Regardless, a full Skyway-wide camera and audio system, monitored exclusively by law enforcement, no more middlemen, is needed to restore safety and security to one of the world's largest Skyway systems, ours. Number 6. Why do you believe we need to change the city trash collection program to adjust the fee structure and permit and opt out? I'll read that quickly again. Why do you believe we need to change the city trash collection program to adjust the fee structure and permit and opt out? What about the current fee structure do you find to be inequitable? We've now had 2 election cycles in which this has been a prime talking point. Why do you wish to change this? How do you plan to offset both the environmental and infrastructure damage created by an opt-out that will require citizens to contract with trash collection companies privately? My reply, I believe we have had to date 1 election cycle, not 2, since the city took over trash hauling. Many citizens want open and inclusive discussions on the trash fee structure as it exists. We haven't had it. And 2, the possibility of creating an opt-out share program. We've not had that as well. The latter need not require outside trash companies being hired by citizens. In our first 90 days, these discussions will occur. My concern for the environment will equal or surpass any mayor before me, and my life to date and past record with civic involvement confirms the public should be confident of this. Number 7, Mary. What is the benefit of ending individual assessments for public works projects? My reply, costs for work on any public property can and should be shared by all property owners across the city in their property tax bill. How do you plan to bundle assessments going forward? Mary continues. In our first 90 days, the public will have their say on how we should best proceed. Okay, number 8. So far, so good. Mary continues, how do you understand ending the honor system for public transit to decrease crime? Numerous cities have pay-as-you-enter systems in place. Folks continue to jump gates when they cannot afford to pay. How do you plan to offset this so as to not disenfranchise impoverished citizens of our community? What is the purpose of retrofitting light rail stations with fences and gates? Well, frankly, this has been answered in the flyer, but I'll go over it again. Is this exclusively about creating barriers for the new pay-as-you-enter structure, or safety, or something else? The flyer already covered this. Do you actually believe these measures will decrease crime, or are you merely hoping that they make criminals more visible and subject to extrajudicial killings by law enforcement officers? Very unfortunate how the tone of her question ended up there. The citizens, ladies and gentlemen, of St. Paul, Ramsey County, in this beautiful state called Minnesota, own our Metro Transit bus and light rail system. Number 2 here is my reply. Current law requires payment to use it. Current law requires payment to use it. Parentheses I put, provisions have been in place for years to accommodate lower income riders. I believe up to 50% off. Third part of my reply, misconduct and even crime have been steadily growing on public transit for years. You know, I opened my gallery here in downtown St. Paul in February 4th of 1994 in Gaultier Plaza, 2 blocks away from where I'm currently at. And right away I was using transit and bus, of course, then. And a year and a half later, maybe 2 years later, the Metropolitan Council wanted to raise transit fares from 75 cents to $1.25. I went and spoke at their public hearing to the council members, then the Metropolitan Council members, and I said, until you get the rising crime and misconduct situation happening on buses under control, you have no business asking riders who are particularly behaving themselves to pay an even greater fare. After that meeting, a gentleman came up to me and he did this, and he shrugged and he said, Bill, there's no political will to help us. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I said this in a previous video. If I'm elected mayor, there will be political will to identify and correct this situation. And then now, 4th point, and I mentioned this on my flyer that Mary read, and many of you. Several years ago, Metro Transit began installing doors to protect drivers from assault. That's what we've come to, ladies and gentlemen. They have now, in the last 3 years, installed doors on most buses. There's occasional one where there's like a clear plastic film. But most buses now have doors to protect the drivers from assault. I mean, what have we come to as a society that they can't even hire drivers because for fear of they're going to be spit upon or punched or worse, and verbal abuse right in their face. I've seen it all over the years. Years ago, I continue now, years ago when light rail was being planned to come to St. Paul from Minneapolis, I wrote at length warning about what would happen if politicians install an honor system light rail line to downtown St. Paul. I contacted Governor Tim Pawlenty at the time, Mayor Chris Cohen at the time, the then Metropolitan Council, the then Ramsey County Commissioners, most of who are still on the county with the county. Unfortunately, my predictions have come true. Today, they are planning another, politicians, the Metropolitan Council, they are planning another honor system light rail route. It's under the name Modern Streetcars on West 7th Street. The name sounds more warm and fuzzy, so it is the track size is the same gauge, same width. Cars are slightly smaller, and I think there's 2 cars rather than 3. And somebody mentioned me, well, it's called modern streetcars because cars can drive over the tracks. Well, in innumerable places along both light rail lines, vehicles drive over the tracks today, and in blocks long areas in downtown St. Paul and Minneapolis. They're working on installing this new light rail line along West 7th Street while ignoring, and this is a fact, while ignoring the rising crime surrounding the rest of the system, the rest of the light rail system. Congresswoman Betty McCollum, I've been told, absolutely agrees fencing and gates are needed at each light rail station to discourage theft of rides and to reduce misconduct and crime, and to increase revenue the cities are due for the transit investments they have paid for. Consideration for the absolute safety and well-being of the paying public using public transit has been overlooked for a quarter century now. I repeat, consideration for the absolute safety and well-being of the paying public using public transit has been overlooked by our elected officials for over a quarter century now. In our first 90 days, the citizens of St. Paul, city staff, myself, will help determine how we best help county and state leaders, as well as the Metropolitan Council, to best address the still deteriorating situation. Okay, number 9 by Mary. Why are you waiting to develop a plan to make the Union Depot a success? I mentioned that in my flyer, ladies and gentlemen, the backside. Since Union Depot's, number 9 point on my flyer, since Union Depot's $250 million restoration being completed in 2012, over $25 million in losses have occurred. That is probably conservative, ladies and gentlemen. I've not taken the time to research if it's up to $30 million, perhaps more at this point. But I do go on, we'll develop a plan to make it a true success. So Mary is inquiring about that. Why are you waiting to develop a plan to make the Union Depot a success? All in good time, all in good time. I will, in detail, ladies and gentlemen, be making this topic a part of my live-streamed town hall meeting in the not-too-distant future. You know, I want to do this live-stream video in March and then May, and you know, I'm going to wait until after the filing deadline for the mayoral race to see who's actually in the race, and not to put this out too soon, but you'll see my thoughts on this. Okay, back again. The camera cut out on the number 9 point. I will continue here currently. Mary continues, do you have a kind of vision for how that can be done at present? Yes, I conceived it and submitted it verbally in a meeting with then Mayor Norm Coleman in October of the year 1999, 22 years ago. A year later, in October of 2000, I submitted detailed drawings as to show how to make the project viable. Norm Coleman, Mayor Coleman, had them on display at his press conference at Union Depot in October of 2000, when he announced he was going to take Union Depot under his wing and get Amtrak back down there in about 18 months' time. It took quite a bit longer than that, but the ball was rolling at that point. After Mayor Coleman then turned his interest over to the county commissioners in 2001, my ideas were frankly discarded for what we now have today, a massive money loser for St. Paul and Ramsey County citizens. Mary continues, whose voices will be centered in the dialogue regarding this plan? My reply, the citizens of this city and this county who own the massive facility. Mary continues, how do you plan to engage disenfranchised members of our community in this dialogue? The taxpayers are the disenfranchised here, ladies and gentlemen, and we will have a robust and exciting series of conversations on this topic in partnership with our county commissioners in our first 90 days. Okay, final page. Yep, Mary continues. Number 10, what do you see as the value for restoring the St. Paul July 4th fireworks? My reply is July 4th was the one day of the year St. Paul, Minnesota's capital city, could shine brightest. That has been taken away from us by City Hall since 2018. I mentioned maybe in a previous video, Mayor Carter announced in June of 2018, his first June as mayor, that he would not be funding the fireworks, that there was better ways to spend the money, etc. Disagree with that, but I respect his decision. However, he then turned down private contributions to keep the fireworks going, and that's where he crossed the line with myself and many people. He had no right to, frankly, kill the fireworks. They were the one attraction we had that brought the most people together possible. They were free for viewing. They also brought economic value. And the other thing is, people around St. Paul in innumerable positions, locations, would watch the fireworks with friends, family, alone, up and down the river valley, just innumerable locations, down University Avenue, Cathedral Hill, the West Side, the High Bridge. It was a tremendous thing that people, really looked forward to each year. City Hall was in no position then and remains in no position this year to say no to the goodwill they produce. How will this be funded? Mary continues. Publicly or privately, we'll have that discussion, ladies and gentlemen, in our first 90 days. Maybe we're at a point that the public would be okay if there's some advertising associated with the fireworks. Otherwise, maybe some people would want them to be more pure and directly from the city, with no advertising attached to their funding. Mary continues, how do you plan to bring a Taste of Minnesota style festival? Let's see here. There we go. Okay, keeping track. Is that where we're at? Yep. Okay. How do you plan to bring a Taste of Minnesota style festival to the Capitol Mall? She continues with a number more questions, and I think I'm going to read just through them and then give you just a final answer. Who will be organizing this? How will it be managed? What are the projected costs for production, including setup, teardown, cleanup, and security during the festival? Will this festival be free and open to the public, or will there be costs for admission to offset the expenses of hosting the festival? Do you anticipate vendors paying for spots as the primary means of funding this? How do you plan to support small and Black and Indigenous / persons of color, BIPOC, own businesses in making a market such a festival? Honestly, when I've been door knocking, a third of this city at this point, I've gone to many business, and it's nice to see that. I don't know if the majority, or actually it's possible more than the majority, have been owned by minority individuals. As far as Mary's questions, in our first 90 days, these questions too will be decided. The public's going to help me come to this conclusion, as well as city staff and appropriate elected officials at the city, the county, and state levels on so many issues. This Reborn Festival should be free to the public, and frankly, it will be free to the public if I'm mayor. And the public should be allowed to make their transactions directly with vendors. Buying tickets at the gates should remain a thing of the past. I think a lot of people who remember that will be happy to hear that. And it should be open to Minnesota-based food and beverage establishments. And I will assume many of those that will want to have a booth there will be minority-owned businesses. The one thing that I would like to see taken out of it is any potential politics. There may be more vendors that want to participate than space will allow. That would be a nice thing. But those who pay the fee to host a booth, food truck, etc., based upon the size, and as long as they provide a certificate of insurance, a lottery will be drawn as to where they will end up. So there won't be any favoritism involved in that. I will also desire that Minnesota state lawmakers mark the Reborn St. Paul July 4th fireworks and the Reborn a Taste of Minnesota style festival. I said a Taste of Minnesota style of festival. I imagine the name is owned by an entity, Taste of Minnesota. And given what's happened to it in the past, maybe it's time to rebrand it with a different name. Maybe we should have a public competition as to what it should be called. I'm kind of in favor of a Taste of the North Star State myself, but let's open that up for public discussion. I would like the state lawmakers to designate the fireworks and the Taste of Minnesota style festival official state events that local politicians can never take away from St. Paul and Minnesota citizens ever again. Today will be my 86th day of door knocking. It is Thursday, May 27th. We have 160 days to go, if I've counted correctly, until Election Day. It's cool today, high of about 50 degrees, windy and rainy, and I'm prepared. I'll be heading out here shortly to do my door knocking with my big umbrella. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Mary, for those questions. While I mentioned your introduction was a little bit rough, I do appreciate your questions. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you a little story. When I was out door knocking in an area of St. Anthony Park, the last house I came to one day, there was a group of individuals out behind the house, and I could see them from the other front door of the next property, and I could see a group of retirees perhaps. And one woman, she had taken out a wine bottle out of a bag, and she did this, so I think the wine bottle was empty. And so maybe each person had had a glass or so of wine at that point. And I came around the driveway up the lane there, beautiful house. And I said, "Hello there, my name is Bill Hosko. I'm campaigning for mayor of St. Paul. May I approach the bench and leave a flyer with you?" They said, "Come on in." And we had a nice discussion, but the one gentleman, he had a yellow cap on. These were Caucasian individuals. He had a yellow cap on, and he was a little bit behind the one woman there, and he was pretty tough on me, and that's okay. I'm applying for a job, and I don't mind that at all. But we had a good discussion. The other three, they piped in a little bit, joined in a little bit, but they kind of just, as he became more and more aggressive to me, and that's cool. I replied, but at one point he made a comment that wasn't very nice. It's, "Well, it's probably best if I go now. Thank you for your time." And then I recall he said something else that kind of pulled me back into the conversation. And we had a good one. And by the time we finished, we were all smiling and laughing, including that gentleman. And I said, "Sir, if I become mayor, I'm going to pull people like you close to me, and I'm going to give you a hug. Because the city can be a much better place if people with a variety of opinions can be brought together where they have feel free to speak their mind." So, and I do mean that with Mary, if you're watching this, and anyone else listening to this, that things can be greatly, greatly improved if I can become mayor. And I don't believe people are going to feel left out like they currently do. I don't think that needs to be, and it won't be. So thank you for listening. Cheers.